The grand chamber of the Galactic Council sparkled under the light of 3 artificial suns. Hundreds of alien representatives filled the circular rows, their varied forms creating a living rainbow of scales, feathers, and crystalline structures. In the center of it all stood Ambassador James Walker, his simple black suit making him look plain compared to the exotic beings around him. The head council member, a tall being with silvery skin, looked down from the highest platform. The council has reviewed Earth's application for full membership status, it announced, voice echoing through the chamber. After careful consideration, we have reached our decision. Walker stood straight, hands clasped behind his back. He had spent 5 years preparing for this moment, leading Earth's efforts to meet every single requirement the council had set. Humans had adapted their technology, cleaned their environment, and proven their worth in countless ways. The application is denied, the head council member declared. Humanity will retain observer status only. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Walker's face remained perfectly calm, though his knuckles turned white behind his back. "May I ask the reason for this decision?" he asked, his voice steady. The council member to the right, a being made of shifting blue gases contained in a transparent suit, spoke up. "Humans are too unpredictable. Your species relies heavily on emotional responses rather than pure logic. This makes you unstable partners in galactic affairs." "We have met every technical requirement," Walker pointed out. "Our ships match council standards. Our medical technology has already benefited multiple species. Our AI systems—" Yes, interrupted another council member, this one covered in golden scales. "Your technical achievements are not in question. It is your nature that concerns us. Humans act on instinct. You take risks. You make decisions based on what you call gut feelings. The council requires stability and predictability." Walker looked around the chamber, noting the nodding heads and agreeing gestures. Only a few species showed signs of disagreement, and they remained silent. The humans had helped many of them over the years, solving problems that pure logic had failed to address, but politics kept them quiet. "I see," Walker said simply. He took a small device from his pocket, his council membership application token, and placed it on the floor. The sound of it touching the marble-like surface seemed to echo unnaturally loud. "Earth thanks the council for its consideration." He turned to leave, his footsteps measured and dignified. Just before reaching the grand doors, he paused and looked back. "A piece of human wisdom, if you'll permit it," he said. "Sometimes the most logical choice is to trust in something you don't fully understand." The doors closed behind him with a soft thud. In the chamber, the council members quickly moved on to other matters, satisfied that they had protected their ordered society from the chaos humans might bring. None of them noticed the small smile on Walker's face as he walked away. Back on his ship, Walker found his assistant Robert waiting with a cup of coffee. "How did they take it?" Robert asked, already knowing the answer from Walker's expression. "Exactly as we expected," Walker replied, taking the coffee. "They're so focused on their precious order that they can't see what's right in front of them. Send the signal home. Tell them to begin Phase 1. Robert nodded and moved to the communications console. "It's funny," he said as he worked. "They think they're protecting themselves from human chaos, but they've gotten so used to having us around that they don't even realize how much they depend on us." Walker took a long sip of his coffee, looking out at the massive council station through the viewport. "They'll learn soon enough. Sometimes the most chaotic thing you can do is simply nothing at all." The ship's engines hummed to life, and Earth's last official representatives to the Galactic Council began their journey home. Behind them, the mighty council continued its session, unaware that they had just set in motion events that would shake their ordered universe to its core. They had dismissed humanity. Soon, they would discover just what that meant. Weeks passed after humanity's dismissal from the Galactic Council, and at first, nothing seemed to change. The massive gears of galactic civilization continued turning as they always had. But beneath the surface, small changes were taking place, quiet as falling snow. The first sign came when Anderson Medical Technologies, Earth's largest medical research company, sent a polite message to its alien partners. Due to restructuring, it read, "We will not be renewing our joint research contracts." Similar messages went out from hundreds of human companies across different sectors. In the Council's Central Medical Research Facility, Director Bloom looked at the emptying human wing. His staff had packed their things efficiently, leaving behind spotless labs and perfectly organized data files. But they'd taken something crucial with them: their insight, their creativity, their tendency to look at old problems in new ways. "They're not making a fuss," one of his alien assistants noted. "They're just leaving." "That's what worries me," Bloom replied, watching as the last human researcher walked out, carrying a small box of personal items. The pattern repeated across council space. Human transport companies declined to renew shipping contracts. Earth-based entertainment networks politely withdrew their content. Human food suppliers cited market restructuring as they closed their popular restaurants. On the trading station of New Venus, Trademaster William Green handled his last official transaction. The alien merchant, a being of pure energy contained in a mechanical suit, seemed confused. "But your shipping routes are the most efficient in the sector," the merchant protested. "How will we maintain our delivery schedules without human logistics?" Green shrugged, a small smile playing at his lips. "I'm sure the Council's logical methods will serve you well," he said, closing his terminal for the last time. In the AI development sector, the changes were equally subtle but significant. Human programmers stopped submitting their regular updates to the Council's systems. Their unique codes, which somehow made AI systems run more smoothly than pure logic dictated they should, were no longer being integrated. The Council's chief technology officer found herself staring at efficiency reports that showed tiny but consistent drops across all systems. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would raise immediate alarms. Just small declines that seemed to multiply week by week. On Earth, Ambassador Walker sat in his office, reviewing the progress reports. Robert entered with the daily update. "Phase 1 is proceeding exactly as planned," he said. "No dramatic gestures, no angry speeches. Just humans quietly going about their business." "Elsewhere?" Walker nodded, looking at a holographic display showing human activities across Council space. Red dots were disappearing one by one as human operations shut down or relocated. "How are they taking it?" "Most of them haven't even noticed yet," Robert replied. "The ones who have are too proud to admit there might be a problem. After all, their logical systems should be able to handle everything perfectly well without our emotional interference." Walker stood and walked to his window, looking out at the bustling city below. Human ships were returning home in greater numbers each day, bringing with them centuries of accumulated knowledge and experience. "You know what the funny thing is?" he said. "We're not doing anything to them. We're just stepping back. Sometimes the best way to show your value is to let people experience your absence." Robert checked his tablet. The Council's efficiency ratings dropped another 0.3% today. Small enough that they can explain it away, big enough that it's starting to add up. "And this is just the beginning," Walker said quietly. "Wait until they need to handle their first real crisis without us. That's when they'll start to understand." Outside, the sun was setting on another busy Earth day. Humanity had been dismissed as too unpredictable, too emotional, too chaotic for the Council's tastes. But as their quiet departure continued, a simple truth was beginning to emerge. Sometimes the most logical systems need a little chaos to function properly. The Council was about to learn this lesson the hard way. The emergency alarms in the Centauri sector blared with an urgency that hadn't been heard in decades. A massive solar storm had damaged 3 major space stations, leaving thousands of beings stranded and critical systems failing. The Council's emergency response fleet arrived promptly, their ships gleaming and their protocols perfect. But something was wrong. "The standard procedures aren't working," announced the fleet commander, his crystalline form flickering with stress patterns. "The damage patterns are irregular." unpredictable. The emergency teams followed their logical protocols perfectly. They analyzed data, calculated probabilities, and executed textbook responses. Yet the situation kept getting worse. The damaged stations continued to deteriorate, and the number of trapped civilians grew. In the Council's Emergency Command Center, the crisis director watched in growing concern as the situation spiraled. 3 years ago, when the Orion stations faced a similar crisis, how did we handle it? She asked. Her assistant pulled up the records. The human emergency teams were present then. They didn't follow standard protocols. They improvised, made decisions based on what they called experience and instinct. And the result? No casualties, minimal damage. They solved it in hours. The crisis director's outer membrane rippled with frustration. The current teams had better technology, more advanced ships, and perfectly logical plans. But they lacked something vital, that human ability to see patterns in chaos, to make intuitive leaps, to try the impossible when the possible wasn't working. Meanwhile, in another part of Council space, a new crisis was emerging. A virus had broken out among 3 species, something that defied standard medical protocols. The Council's medical teams worked tirelessly, applying every known treatment method with perfect precision. But the virus adapted. It changed in ways their models hadn't predicted. In the main medical facility, Dr. Lux, a being of pure light, stared at test results that made no sense. "Get me the human medical archives," he ordered. But when his assistant accessed the database, they found only basic data. The detailed research notes, the innovative treatment approaches, the hunches that human doctors had followed to breakthrough discoveries. All were gone, withdrawn along with the human medical teams. Back on Earth, Ambassador Walker received the reports of both crises. He sat in his office, reading the details as Robert brought him his evening coffee. "They're struggling," Robert observed. "Should we offer help?" Walker shook his head slowly. "Not yet. They dismissed us because they couldn't understand how we think. Now they need to understand why that matters." A message flashed across his screen. An unofficial communication from a mid-level council member. "They're starting to reach out privately," Walker noted, "asking if we might be willing to consult unofficially on these crises." And our response? The same as always. We're restructuring our external operations. Very polite, very logical, very final. Robert smiled slightly, using their own bureaucratic language against them. "They wanted a purely logical galaxy," Walker replied. "Now they're getting exactly what they asked for. Logic without intuition, order without adaptation, protocols without that human spark of creativity." The emergency alarms in the Centauri sector continued to sound. The virus continued to spread. And across Council space, more problems were emerging, problems that couldn't be solved by pure logic alone. In the Council chambers, the first whispers of doubt began to circulate. They had dismissed humanity as too unpredictable, too emotional, too chaotic. But as their perfectly logical systems failed to handle real-world chaos, some began to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake. The cracks in their perfect order were beginning to show, and they were growing larger by the day. The Council's central AI hub, once a marvel of efficiency, was running at 70% capacity and declining. Warning lights flickered across control panels as systems that had run smoothly for decades began to stutter and lag. The head of AI operations, a silicon-based being, floated before the main control interface, their crystalline form clouded with concern. "Run the diagnostic again," they ordered. Diagnostic complete. The system responded. No logical errors detected. Systems performing within programmed parameters. Efficiency continues to decline. The head of operations knew what was missing. The human coding teams had always added something they called workarounds. Small, seemingly illogical adjustments that somehow made everything work better. The Council had tolerated these inefficient methods because they couldn't argue with the results. Now, without those regular human updates, The systems were slowly becoming more rigid, less adaptive. In the entertainment districts of major council worlds, another crisis was unfolding. Attendance at cultural centers had dropped by 40%. Council citizens were becoming restless, bored with the perfectly structured and logical entertainment options available to them. I missed the human stories, a young energy being complained to its parent. They didn't always make sense, but they made me feel things I didn't know I could feel. The decline wasn't limited to entertainment. In the great dining halls of the council's capital world, empty tables gathered dust where human restaurants had once served their illogical but highly popular cuisine. Council species who had developed a taste for human food found the perfectly balanced nutrient solutions unsatisfying in comparison. Trade routes that had once hummed with efficiency now faced increasing delays. The logical trading systems couldn't adapt to unexpected situations the way human traders had. Ships waited in ports while minor bureaucratic issues that humans would have solved with a conversation and a handshake now required lengthy formal processes. In his office on Earth, Ambassador Walker reviewed the latest reports with Robert. The Council's economy has contracted by 15%, Robert noted. Their AI systems are struggling, their cultural sectors are in decline, and their trade efficiency has dropped to pre-human contact levels. Walker nodded, studying a holographic display showing the spreading effects of humanity's withdrawal. And the unofficial messages. Increasing daily. Various council species trying to establish private agreements, offering special status, exclusive contracts. Some are even suggesting they might break away from the council if it means regaining access to human cooperation. A small alert flashed on Walker's screen. Another council AI system had just dropped below acceptable performance levels. These systems, designed with perfect logical principles, were proving surprisingly dependent on regular human modifications to handle real-world conditions. It's interesting, Walker mused, how they never noticed that their perfect logical systems worked best with a dash of human chaos mixed in. Like a complex recipe that needs that one strange ingredient to make everything come together. Robert checked his tablet. The Council's public approval ratings are at their lowest point in recorded history. Citizens are starting to ask questions about why everything seems to be getting worse. And how are the Council members responding? The same way they always do, with logical explanations and perfect plans that somehow don't solve anything. Walker stood and walked to his window, watching Earth ships returning from across the galaxy. Each one carried humans who had quietly packed up their lives in council space, bringing their ideas, their creativity, and their illogical ways of solving problems back home. They thought they were maintaining order by keeping us at arm's length, Walker said. Instead, they're discovering that their order was partially built on our chaos all along. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the city. Somewhere in council space, another system was failing. Another problem was emerging that pure logic couldn't solve. Another species was realizing just how much they had come to rely on human unpredictability. The council had wanted a perfectly ordered galaxy. Now they were getting exactly that, and it was proving far less perfect than they had imagined. News of the human breakthrough spread across council space like wildfire. Earth's scientists, working independently from council oversight, had achieved what many thought impossible. They had developed stable wormhole technology that didn't rely on the council's established methods. In the council's main chamber, the announcement caused chaos. How? Demanded the head council member, their silvery skin dulled with stress. Our best minds concluded that stable wormholes required perfectly controlled conditions. The humans had done it differently. Instead of fighting the natural instability of wormholes, they had found a way to work with it. The solution had come from a team of scientists who decided to think like a wormhole, an approach so illogical it had made perfect sense. The first private message arrived at Earth's diplomatic office within hours of the announcement. The Trading Guild of the Proxima Systems formally requests a private audience regarding technology exchange, it read. More messages followed, each one from a different council species trying to establish independent relations with Earth. Ambassador Walker sat in his office, watching the flood of incoming communications. "They're breaking ranks," Robert observed, sorting through the diplomatic requests. "Every major species in the council is trying to make a separate deal." "Of course they are," Walker replied. "They finally realized that they need us more than we need them." In the council chambers, the unity that had stood for centuries began to crack. Species that had always voted as a bloc now argued openly. Some demanded immediate action to restore relations with Earth. Others insisted that maintaining logical order was more important than any technological advancement. The breaking point came when the Arturian delegation, one of the council's founding members, stood to address the chamber. "We have made a grave error," their speaker announced. "In our pursuit of perfect order, we have rejected the very chaos that drives innovation. My species will no longer support this policy of isolation from humanity." Other delegations rose in support. The chamber erupted in debate. Centuries of carefully maintained protocol collapsed as species chose sides. Those who had benefited most from human cooperation faced off against those who feared human unpredictability. On Earth, Walker received an urgent message from a mid-level council bureaucrat. "Help us," it read simply. "Everything is falling apart." "Should we respond?" Robert asked. Walker smiled, remembering his words in the council chamber months ago. "Not yet. They're still trying to solve this with pure logic. Let them realize that sometimes the most logical solution is to embrace a little chaos." The council's crisis deepened. Their AI systems, already struggling without human input, began experiencing cascading failures. Trade disputes that human mediators once solved with simple conversations now threatened to turn into full economic conflicts. Even the Council's emergency response teams, once the pride of their civilization, had become hesitant and ineffective without human insight to guide them. In a private meeting room deep within the Council station, a group of influential species gathered secretly. "We cannot continue like this," one said. "Our society functioned better with human involvement, even if we didn't understand how or why. But they'll demand conditions," another worried. "They'll want full membership, equal voting rights, the ability to influence council decisions." "Perhaps," said a third. "That's exactly what we need." Back on Earth, Walker received word of the secret meeting. He turned to Robert with a knowing look. "Phase 5 is complete," he said. "They're ready." "Ready for what?" "Ready to accept that perfect order isn't always the answer. Ready to understand that sometimes you need a little human chaos to make things work." The sun rose over Earth's capital city, its light catching on the ships that now carried human innovation independently across the galaxy. The Council's perfect order was crumbling, and from its ruins, something new was about to emerge, something that combined the best of both worlds. The question was no longer whether humanity would return to Council space, but on whose terms. The emergency session of the Galactic Council looked very different from the meeting, where they had dismissed humanity months ago. Gone was the perfect order, the calm, logical proceedings. Instead, the chamber buzzed with urgent voices and worried faces. The head council members stood at the central platform, their usual commanding presence diminished by recent events. "This emergency session will now begin," they announced, their voice lacking its former confidence. "We are here to address the growing crisis affecting all council operations." A holographic display activated in the chamber center, showing statistics that no amount of logical explanation could dismiss. Council efficiency, down 40%. Economic growth, negative for the first time in centuries. AI systems, operating at minimal capacity. Emergency response effectiveness, critical failure rates rising. "The numbers are clear," stated the Council's chief analyst, a being of pure mathematics. "Our civilization functioned at peak efficiency when we worked alongside humans. Their absence has revealed dependencies we failed to recognize." The Trading Guild representative spoke next. "We've lost more than their technology and labor. We've lost their way of thinking, their ability to see solutions where our logic sees only problems." From their observation booth, a group of lesser species who had always worked closely with humans added their voices. They solved problems by thinking differently, one said. They called it thinking outside the box, a concept we dismissed as illogical until we saw the results. The council chamber, designed for perfect acoustics, carried every word to every ear. Species that had once prided themselves on their logical superiority now found themselves facing an uncomfortable truth. Logic alone wasn't enough. "I move that we formally acknowledge our error," announced the Arturian speaker, rising from their seat, "and that we extend an invitation to Earth to rejoin the Council, not as observers, but as full members." The chamber erupted in discussion. In the past, such disorder would have been quickly silenced. Now, it was allowed to continue as species finally expressed their true thoughts. On Earth, Ambassador Walker watched the proceedings through a secure feed. Robert stood beside him, monitoring the incoming diplomatic messages. "They're starting to understand," Robert said. Walker nodded. "Understanding is good, but we need more than that. We need them to accept." In the council chamber, the head council member called for order. "We will now present evidence of humanity's contribution to galactic civilization," they announced. The holographic display shifted, showing scene after scene. Human medical teams solving impossible cases with intuitive leaps, human engineers fixing perfect systems with imperfect but effective solutions, human diplomats resolving conflicts through what they called reading the room, a skill no logical species had mastered. "Our perfect order," admitted the head council member, "was perfected by their chaos. Our logical systems worked better with their illogical adjustments. We dismissed them because we didn't understand how they thought. We failed to realize that this was precisely what made them valuable." The vote that followed was nothing like the one that had dismissed humanity. Species after species voted to extend a formal invitation to Earth, offering full membership and equal status in all council affairs. But it wasn't over yet. "Humanity will have conditions," warned one council member. "Of course they will," replied another. "And for once, we should listen to them." The final tally was unprecedented, unanimous approval. The council had never united so completely on any issue before. In his office, Walker received the official invitation. It was perfectly worded, logically structured, and clearly sincere. "Should we respond immediately?" Robert asked. Walker smiled, remembering that day months ago, when he had walked out of the council chamber. "No," he said. "Let them wait just a little longer. Let them feel what it's like to hope for something they can't control." The sun set on another Earth day, while across the galaxy, the mighty Galactic Council waited anxiously for a response from the species they had once dismissed as too unpredictable to join their ranks. They were about to learn that accepting chaos didn't mean losing order. It meant making it stronger. 1 year after humanity's return to the Galactic Council, the changed nature of galactic civilization was clear to everyone. The council chamber, once a place of rigid order, now hummed with a different kind of energy. Logical debate mixed with intuitive discussion, creating something entirely new. Ambassador Walker stood at the central platform, addressing the assembled species. Behind him, the holographic displays showed the results of the new approach. Council efficiency upped 60% beyond previous peaks, technological advancement accelerating at unprecedented rates, and crisis response success rates higher than ever recorded. "The galaxy doesn't work by logic alone," Walker said, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "It doesn't work by chaos alone either. It works best when we combine both approaches." The gathered representatives nodded in agreement. The past year had proven this beyond any doubt. Human emergency teams now worked alongside logical planners, combining careful analysis with quick intuition. Human programmers collaborated with AI specialists, their illogical coding practices making the logical systems more adaptive and resilient. In the medical sector, Dr. Lux worked with human doctors, watching in fascination as they combined careful research with intuitive leaps. "I still don't understand how you make these connections," he admitted to his human colleague. "That's exactly why it works," she replied with a smile. "We think differently. Together, we see the whole picture." The new council voting system reflected this changed understanding. Important decisions now required both logical analysis and intuitive assessment. Species known for pure logic partnered with those who could spot patterns in chaos. The result was better decisions, fewer crises, and more innovation than either approach had achieved alone. Robert stood at the back of the chamber, reviewing the latest reports on his tablet. "The last holdouts are coming around," he told Walker after the session. "Even the most logic-focused species are requesting human advisors. Not because they want to become like us," Walker noted, "but because they've learned that different perspectives make everyone stronger." Across council space, the changes were visible everywhere. The entertainment districts buzzed with life again, logical art forms mixing with human creativity to create new forms of expression. Trading posts hummed with activity as human flexibility combined with alien precision to solve problems faster than ever. The Council's AI systems, now running on a hybrid of logical protocols and human intuition-based programming, operated at levels that pure logic had never achieved. "It's like teaching them to dance," one human programmer explained. "Sometimes you need to know the steps, and sometimes you need to feel the music." In the emergency response sector, the new approach had saved countless lives. When a massive spatial anomaly threatened 3 worlds, logical analysis combined with human instinct found a solution no single approach would have discovered. Walker stood at his old office window on Earth, preparing to return to his new post as head of the Council's Integration Committee. "Did you ever think it would work out this well?" Robert asked. "I knew we needed each other," Walker replied. "They needed our chaos to make their order flexible. We needed their logic to give our chaos direction. The trick was getting everyone to see it." The sun rose on a new day in council space. In laboratories, humans worked beside logical species, their different approaches creating breakthroughs neither could have achieved alone. In diplomatic chambers, human intuition helped logical minds navigate complex negotiations. In space stations and on planets, the two approaches merged and multiplied, creating something greater than the sum of its parts. The Council had discovered that true strength didn't come from perfect order or pure chaos, but from the balance between them. They had dismissed humanity once, not understanding that their perfect logical order needed a touch of human chaos to thrive. Now, looking out at the galaxy they had built together, no one could imagine returning to the old way of doing things. The Council had crumbled without humanity, but with them, it had rebuilt itself into something far greater than before. Perfect logic had met human chaos, and the galaxy was better for it.